From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, this is a Headache Soul production. Welcome to Just the Tip-Sters, America's favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Morgan, and with me this morning is my beautiful and talented co-host, Cocaine Bear.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
How's it? Can I call you Coke for short?
Right? Oh, my God.
Say hello, Joshua.
That was insane.
Yeah, say hello, Joshua.
Oh, hi.
Joshua and I got to see Cocaine Bear this week, and
so
it
good.
is
so bad.
I wouldn't call it a masterpiece, but almost. It skates the line. Yeah, you're right. It's so bad, it's good.
Uh-huh. I mean, on purpose, though.
Yes. They're in on the joke. It's not like I was telling Joshua my favorite part about this was hearing Elizabeth Banks, who directed it, which was a bit surprising, and her husband produced it. It's very interesting on the Conan O'Brien podcast. Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and he is raving about this movie and talking about, how much he loved it, and he got to see an early copy of it. And the only thing Elizabeth Banks says is, I was just surprised how much the bear loved cocaine. That was the only thing she said about the movie. And I'm like, well, it's really funny because he's not real, but it's funny.
Gosh.
It's pretty fucking funny.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
boy.
I want to say thank you to Tipster Jerry, who emailed me and said last week's episode, I made him laugh. I think because I was so, I think it was because I was so, I don't know what made Jerry laugh. I think because I was so angry at, false narratives that are put out there. So
You're funny when you're angry.
And it's International Women's Day all over again. Thank you so much, Joshua. Is this why you poke me and poke me and poke the bear? Wait, you're the bear. What am I? What's a female bear? Bear?
I don't know, because I know I was going to go with, some lesbian slurs at this point, but
wait, what?
Well, because bear is like a big
dude,
big gay
furry.
Dude, yeah,
it's furry,
like big guy. Like,
right. You called yourself a bear. That's the only reason I introduced you as the Cocaine Bear. I didn't call you a bear. You called yourself a bear.
I don't think that's very slurish. I think that's fine. I think that's an okay thing.
All right.
I think some of the like.
Am I a bull? Am I like a bull?
Well, you'd be lipstick. Come on.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. I forgot.
Yeah.
I know. I don't look good in Doc Martens or flannel.
But now I'm picturing it.
Yeah, you need Jesus. Is what happens with you. Is you need Jesus. If you're picturing me in Doc Martens and flannel. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, thank you, Tipster Jerry. I'm glad I made you laugh. And I found this quote, of course, after we did the episode, but I think it was after. I don't think I said it last week. I keep finding these quotes that are very succinct and meaningful. And this one was, extraordinary theories require extraordinary proof.
Yeah, I like that.
I do too, because it made me so mad that they were trying to find a connection between Delphi and the Stevenson murders, and there just is none. There is none. I also saw a tweet this week, and I know it feels like all I talk about is Detective Coy Cox or Carrie Rawson, Dennis Rader's daughter. And I promise I talk about other things, but Carrie keeps hitting it out of the ballpark. Carrie was interviewed on a show called Banfield. It was on the News Nation network. I don't know. Okay. I don't know what that is, but she posted the interview, and she, again, when I think I can't love her anymore, I do. She, this woman has been through so much, and she was talking about the effect that serial killers have on the people around them, whether it's, family or friends. It's like, the ripple effect. It moves out. But the thing she said I thought was so beautiful is she said, allow yourself time to grieve.
Yeah.
Like, people maybe take on guilt or, because of family, like I should have seen or,
Sure. So
there's a little bit of that in today's case, because you'll hear later on, this was a long time coming, this case, but the detectives got to speak to family members of the suspect, and the reactions were varied. So, so this is the solved case of Carol Sue Klaber
Okay.
in Northern Kentucky. Now, here's what happened was I was emailing, texting, talking to Coy Cox about his interviews with all the local media about the connection between the Delphi case and the Stevenson case. And he kindly gave me the heads up and said, well, it's pretty generic,
Right.
which led me to understand, yeah, there's no fucking connection.
Right.
So what he did drop in my lap, though, was 2 weeks ago, we did solve the Klaber case. And I'm like, what the fuck's a Klaber case? So I look it up and I go, do you mean Carol Sue Klaber? It's like a 47-year-old case.
Oh, okay. So,
And he said, yes, we solved that. But it was in investigation of another case.
oh, cool.
I know. And, two of our friends are involved, Coy Cox and Othram Lambs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know. So it's a pretty interesting
All right.
case. I know. And what's so beautiful is that, I cry a lot. If you listen to this podcast, you know who I am, and I cry a lot. And I try to get Matt to cut things out, and he does the best he can because here's my problem. I start crying and then I continue to talk. And what I need to do is cry and stop and then start back when I can talk again. So I might put that on your list of things to remind me of. Like,
no, how about I remind you to feel your emotions?
Well, like I can stop. I cannot stop.
It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
It isn't necessarily a bad thing, but people don't need to be hearing me cry. Yeah. That's not what people listen to, unless they're weird and they enjoy like AMSR crying or whatever. Yeah, I don't like that. So one of the things I love about Detective Coy Cox is that I thought the only case that brought him to tears was the Stevenson case, but that is untrue. And it is a thing of beauty to see. So they did a 50-minute long press conference on Wednesday, March 8th.
Okay.
At the Boone County Sheriff's Office, saying they were going to discuss significant information about the Carol Sue Klaber case. And I knew because the week before he goes, press conference next Wednesday, I'm very excited. This case is very sad. And I looked it up, and it is sad. And it is not something we have not heard. A beautiful young girl gets, raped and murdered. And what is so incredible to me is how Coy Cox handles probably every murder case he's ever been on with the gentleness of someone who's a family member.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It really is incredible. So I knew he was really excited about this press conference.
Are you done? Say it.
I can speak clearly, okay. Can't I?
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me that I can always just stop and cry.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, you're not crying, so that's good. So this is a case from June of 1976. But to get back to Carol's case, we have to skip ahead to a case from 1978, and there is a connection. I'm just hoping. I spend so much time writing all this out. I really hope that you can follow along to this timeline. Yeah. Once we get past the case that they started investigating, thinking it was related to Carol Sue, we'll get into the meat of Carol Sue's case, I promise, and it all makes sense.
Okay.
So if you happen to see the 50-minute long press conference, it's on the Boone County Sheriff's Office Facebook Live. I couldn't find it, but Coy sent it to me, so I got to see it. And a funny little note, he, was wearing a suit and a tie. Everyone who was up there wearing a suit and a tie, except for those in uniform. He said he hates monkey suits. And I'm like, yeah, suck it up. He looked really cute in his blue suit. He's also let his hair grow because for a long time he had the cop flat top.
Oh, okay.
That I thought looked good on him. And now his hair is a little longer. He looks like Chad Everett from Medical Center with the dry look from the 70s. He has like helmet hair a little bit.
Okay.
He has a lot of hair. It's very pretty. It's like salt and pepper. But cool. I'm like, I cannot wait to email him and go, you look like a goddamn hippie.
Oh.
It's much longer than I've ever seen it. It's interesting. And here's a fun note. My friend Dwight from elementary school messaged me, and because he actually had gone to church with Bill and Peggy Stevenson, and he is a listener to the podcast. He said, I saw the story. I saw all the stories about the Delphi and Stevenson murders connection, and there is no connection. And then I saw Coy Cox on his press conference, and he is very handsome, and you and my wife need to stay away from him. And I'm like, well, Dwight, Detective Cox is blissfully married to his wife of several decades, and your wife is madly in love with you, and he is like a brother to me. So, you don't have to worry about me or your wife. And Coy is not, he doesn't use his immense amount of salt and pepper hair to get chicks. So this 15-minute press conference was long, much longer in my mind than a regular press conference. Usually it's like they just kind of introduce the shit and get out.
Okay.
This one was so layered. So Carol Sue's case, I love the fact that Coy Cox and his partner Tim Adams are basically the entire cold case department for the Boone County Sheriff's.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And they fucking do everything. And it's
Nice.
something I'm finding out about the state of Kentucky that makes me love it even more is it's very collaborative.
Cool.
They don't mind calling, well, let me say every area except for Kenton County, who doesn't want to share anything about the Randy Sellers case. They call in the Kentucky State Police for help. They will call in the FBI. They'll ask neighboring states, for help, a fresh set of eyes. They're that open,
Cool. Good.
So here is Coy Cox being very collaborative and saying, I need to go back to the original detective in Carol Sue's case, Kentucky State Police Detective Jerry Keith. And he made a point of saying that he kept such great records that he and his partner Tim were able to piece together things to help solve Carol's case. But so before we go to Carol's case, in 2019, what Coy and his partner did was pretty amazing. So they went to Georgia because they were investigating a man who looked like the sketch, which he also mentioned the sketch artist from the 70s did a magnificent job because it really was close to what the perp looked like. And I get why this man, they had to investigate him. They found he lived in the area at the time. He was an appropriate age, drove a car that was similarly toned, and they, found him. And I think it was through DNA. They found he's living in Georgia.
Oh, wow.
It took 41 years for them to get him, but they go to Georgia and say, does Carol Sue Klaber ring a bell? And he said, I don't think so. But then he said, I know why you're here. I've heard a lot of women.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. He's 77 years old in 2019. And he did admit, he said, the victim's name they're not mentioning. She now lives thousands of miles away from Kentucky, but they went and talked to her. She said what happened. She pulled in her garage at 2 a.m. and he came from behind her, had a knife, said, she's like 20, 21. He said, act like a 14-year-old.
Oh, jeez.
When she didn't do that to his satisfaction, he burned her several times with a cigarette. Oh. She said that she feels she got out of the situation by saying, I have a daughter. Please don't kill me. She's all I have. I'm all she has.
Yeah, right.
So he let her go. But they got him on her rape. He drove her to a secondary location, so they got him on kidnapping.
Okay.
And they extradited him from Georgia to Kentucky. Now, that man's name is Michael Dean Tate, and he, was charged with rape, kidnapping, assault. It just, So at the time in 2019, the Commonwealth Attorney Rob Sanders said, this is some of the most amazing police work I've ever seen. It just is so amazing to me that they were looking at a different case and solve another one. And get, he's 77 at this point. Maybe he isn't a danger anymore, but it's good to get him off the street.
Sure.
And he said, I know why you're here. I heard a lot of women.
Yeah.
So this nameless victim was like, he grabbed me by the throat. He forced me into his car and he drove me to another place in Park Hills. She begged for her life and he eventually released her. And then she went to police. This is, in my mind, really good, not only police work, but there's some really good news reporting here, which I'll get to. So they go to Georgia. They find Michael Dean Tate. It was a single fingerprint on the victim's car door handle.
Wow.
And it had been kept all those years, and Coy Cox found it in the, boxes of information and evidence. So they have to go to talk to the victim and say, did you have your car detailed? Had your car been worked on recently? Nope. Mm-mm. Anyone else drive your car? Mm-mm. No. There was no reason for Michael Dean Tate's fingerprint to be on her car.
Wow.
They put it into AFIS, Automated Fingerprint Identification System, and then it comes up as Michael Dean Tate. So they find, where he is now, which is Georgia, and where he was in the 70s, which was Cincinnati. So he was in the area.
Wow.
And I have to give him this. He waived, any sort of preliminary hearing, and he was just automatically bound over to the grand jury. And Coy Cox said, we're confident in this case. We have the evidence that says he absolutely was the man who was there and acted out this crime on that victim. So looking at that case, they ended up flying all over different states to figure out, and they thought they might have the guy who killed Carol Sue Klaber. But then they realized he admitted a lot of stuff and he didn't admit that. In 1978, do you know where you were? Well, yes. Do you, know anything about this? Yeah, I remember walking up to a woman in her garage and, doing what I do. And they said, do you know when that was? And he goes, I'm not sure, but I think it was 1978. So he's, even though he's 77,
right,
he's admitting what he did. So Coy Cox says when they released the information about that case in 2019, we were looking at a different case. I won't identify that case. I'll just tell you there were similarities with a number of cases in the Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky area.
Okay.
So he will not say which cold case they're looking at, which we know it's Carol Sue's case now. But so the local news channel WLWT, I think it might be NBC. Everything sort of changed after I left, but I think it's an NBC affiliate. They went back and looked through all the open cold cases in Boone County, and they found one that was similar. This is really good investigative reporting. They figured out who it was.
Okay. So just the mention a couple of years ago of there's another cold case, the reporters came in and said, oh, this is
we found one with startling, terrifying similarities.
Yeah, okay. That is good investigative
really
journalism.
Good.
Yeah.
That's impressive to me.
Yeah.
Very much unlike people who try and connect things that aren't connected.
Sure.
What they found was Carol Sue Klaber. She was a Dixie Heights High School junior. She was 16 years old, and she was found. And here's another thing that I'm trying so hard to get all the details right, but you'll see there's quite a few things that may not be not my fault, but records may not have been kept great. So they say it was Walton. They say it was Union. They say it was Boone County. So I think part of Walton is Kenton County, but maybe Walton is Boone County. But let's just say she was found along Chambers Road on June 5th. She went missing the evening of June 4th. She rides her bike, and she told her mom, I'm going to ride my bike, and then I'm going to have dinner with some friends. And she never came home. She is found the next day on Chambers Road along the side of the road. And I will tell you, during the press conference, Coy Cox made a special point of showing with his hands the amount of space off the road she was put, which was not far.
Oh, wow.
He didn't try to hide her, put her on the side of the road. And he said if someone had stopped to change a tire, they would have run over her.
Oh, wow.
So she was identified quickly. She'd been raped, strangled, and beaten to death.
Jesus.
They estimate it to be a tire iron.
Oh my
It
God.
was a rounded object. So, of course, they immediately start asking, when was the last time she was seen? Who saw her last? And this is where he says, Detective Jerry Keith did an amazing job with the case file. And he said, Detective Keith passed away, I think, in 2017. And he said he worked on this case for 10 years. And then it became classified a cold case. But he kept it with him his whole life. I'm guessing, all cases are important, but I know homicide detectives have cases that mean a lot to them. And I feel like Carol Sue's, case meant a whole lot to Detective Keith. So Carol Sue was seen by a neighbor who watched her get into a car while she was riding her bike. I don't know if he put her bike like in the back or something. He was a white blonde man in his early 20s. He was slim, 6 feet tall, and he was driving a gray 1970s Pontiac with maroon interior. So there was question whether it was a Pontiac Grand Prix or a Chevy Monte Carlo. And they could look alike.
Sure.
Those kind of sedans could look alike. Michael Dean Tate was an almost identical description to the rape from 1978 and the car, which is why they went to Georgia to talk to him about Carol Sue.
Got it.
But they were like, you know what? We know he's not our guy.
Got it.
But so they're still looking, but they got a dangerous rapist arrested 41 years later. So in this press conference, Detective Cox starts off by thanking everyone because he's that guy who wants to include everyone. And, he does not like the term cold case. He never likes that. He said they may be old, but they're never going to be cold. And I think it's just beautiful how he, how he looks at those things. I'll tell you one of the things that made me love him even more. It's maybe 5 minutes in. It's very close to the beginning. He doesn't want to say the perpetrator's name. So he waits till the very end, really, to say his name. But there's a giant picture of Carol Sue. Beautiful, big, giant picture of Carol Sue on an easel. And he's behind a podium. There's 3 tables spread out, media behind him.
Okay.
And he looks over to the picture of Carol Sue, and you can see it. His stomach drops, and he tears up, and he walks over and gets a bottle of water, which I'm going to try to remember that. If I start to cry, I'm going to start drinking something.
Right.
But he pulls himself together. But I was like, oh my God, please don't cry. Please don't cry. If you cry, I'm going to cry. Please don't cry. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see, he goes, excuse me, and gets water. And I'm like, oh my God, that's very smart. Get some water. Give yourself a minute to collect yourself.
Sure.
And then he comes back and he just, and I know I've told this story before, but when Mark and I were talking to Detective Cox several years ago about the Stevenson case, I started to cry. And back then, I would back away from the microphone. And Mark is in his office with all the controls. I'm in the podcast room, and Coy Cox is on Mark's computer via Zoom. So he can't see me.
He can't see you.
I would always go in. The people we would interview via Zoom, I would go in and like wave to the computer. Hi, I'm here. I'm going over here now. And everyone always thought Mark and I were in the same room, and we were not.
Right.
We somehow managed to, it was almost like we could see each other, but we weren't in the same room.
Yeah.
So I back away from the microphone, and Coy goes, Mark, I think I lost Melissa. And Mark goes, no, she's crying. And I pull myself together, and we finish the interview. And after, one of the things I loved about him is after interviewing him, the number of times I have, we would spend 45 minutes to an hour after with the recording turned off talking about cases.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I want you to know, if a cop tells you that they don't cry, they're lying. And I was like, okay, thank you.
That's beautiful.
And then the more we talk, he starts crying. So we're both sitting there crying like 2 big fucking babies. But, to see him cry at a press conference over something that isn't the case I thought would make him cry just made me love him even more.
That's so wonderful.
He's an incredibly beautiful person. So he talks about investigating the 78 rape, and he said, I was shocked at the number of unsolved rapes and murders in the northern Kentucky area in the 70s and 80s. He made me feel a lot better because I didn't know jack shit about Randy Sellers.
Okay.
He was 2 years older than me. We went to the same school. Right. I had no idea he was missing. And I don't know if it was a time, an era where parents like protected you from bad news. It was definitely not, the 24-hour news cycle.
Sure.
You watch the news at 7 p.m. and then it's gone.
Right.
And it wasn't like I was talking to a lot of adults about missing people or rapes or murders. You know what I mean?
Back then.
I'm 15. No. Right, exactly. In 1976, I'm 12. Right. Yeah, I'm not like, hey, did you hear about that? Right. Yeah, that's...
Now it's one of your favorite topics.
Well, it is a little bit. So yeah, I got problems is what you're saying. So, I
didn't put any judgment on it.
No, not at all. So one of the things that Coy Cox really respected about Detective Jerry Keith with the Kentucky State Police is that he worked very hard, to keep Carol Sue's case top of mind in an era when news wasn't all the time.
Sure.
What you had was a lot of newspapers.
Newspapers, yeah, right.
So this is from the Cincinnati Post, Tuesday, December 13th of 1977. So it's about a year and a half after Carol Sue's murder.
Okay.
Somebody sent an anonymous letter to the Cincinnati Post saying that he'd killed a young woman whose body was found in northern Kentucky in 1976, and that he knew the identity of another slain woman. He types his letter and calls himself Mr. Open Case.
Okay.
So the letter's postmarked December 4th from Louisville, which is pretty weird because why would you be in Louisville sending it to the Cincinnati Post? But anyway, he's not, exactly geographically desirable. So he sends it to Post reporter Paul Kenkel in care of the Kentucky Post, which is interesting. They open it and the Kentucky State Police are examining the letter and we're doubting its authenticity, said Detective Jerry Keith, but we're not discounting it. The letter discusses in detail the death of Carol Sue Klaber, who was found June 5th, 1976, near Walton. The author of the letter claims to know the identity of an unidentified young woman who he calls Miss X. And she's, like a Jane Doe, found by police in Grant County, October 17th of 1976. Kinkel's byline appeared in 3 different stories in the Post, November 30th, December 1st, and he talked about an indictment of a man named Larry Ralston who was charged with murdering 4 young women in the Cincinnati area. Can I just say I never heard about that either? I have no idea where all these cases come from. Here's some excerpts from the letter. Some of these things I read about these cases in the paper are not exact, like the murder of Miss Carol Sue Klaber on Friday, June 4th, 1976. I can tell you all about her, that she died after 8 p.m. The other girls, they didn't get any suspects from them, but they came very close on Carol Sue Klaber. The description you gave the paper was not right. The height was way off by an inch, but you're in the right age group. The weight group, boy, they messed that up altogether. I'm not a toothpick. You insult me by saying I'm 150 pounds. Wrong. I was 185 pounds at the time of her murder.
Oh my gosh.
She did not die after midnight. Like I said, she died shortly after 8 p.m. She was struck 3 times in the head with a nice lead pipe, a very nice lead pipe indeed. I may use that pipe again soon. Ha ha. She did not put up a fight at all. That took the fun out of me killing her. I just about messed up on that one. I shouldn't have let her take the bike home first. Oh, I don't know if that's a true thing or not. Some old meddling lady must have seen me take Carol home with her bike. You mean to tell me you have not found out who Miss X is yet? I could tell you all about that, plus a whole lot more. He signed it, your new friend, Mr. Open Case. P.S. I'm going to call myself Mr. Open Case until you figure out who I really am. Later.
Gross.
Yeah. So here's what he got. Here's what he got wrong. Detective Keith said, The only information in the letter that hadn't been previously published in newspapers is the reference to a lead pipe. And Detective Keith said, "We don't even know if it was a lead pipe or what was used to beat Miss Klaber. It was a narrow, heavy, blunt instrument, which we know now probably a tire iron."
Okay.
Detective Keith also said Miss Klaber had been hit more than 3 times. He said he considered this inaccuracy a major flaw in the letter.
Yeah.
So what sort of fuckface?
So it's just some guy that wants to play with.
Yeah. Murder victims, families saying terrible things and taunting detectives.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Gross.
Yeah. So I know Coy is like a year or 2 maybe older than me. So we're about the same age. So it makes me feel better that he is a cop and he's like, I had no idea how many unsolved rapes and murders there were in the 70s and 80s in what you think is like this small little area.
Sure.
So last summer of 2022, Othram Labs, our friends at Othram Labs, becomes involved in this case.
Okay.
So another one of the things I love about Coy is that he follows protocol. So they had sent the DNA from Carol's case to the Kentucky State Lab, and they did all they could with it.
Okay.
And he asked for permission on September 27th from Kentucky State Labs to send the sample to Othram to see what they can do. So Othram specializes in genotyping and phenotyping and genetic genealogy.
What is the difference? What is?
I knew you were going to ask. Hold on. I actually have a definition somewhere. Okay, so phenotyping is the observable characteristics or traits of an organism that are produced by the interaction of the genotype and the environment, the physical expression of one or more genes.
Okay, so the phenotype is the expression of the genes.
Yeah.
Got it.
So they, specialize in this, and they have a proprietary, set of tests or systems that no one else has.
Sure.
This is why they released press releases last week, between 3 and 5 cases.
Wow.
I know.
That's amazing.
They're remarkable. So Coy asked Kentucky State Police November 27th, can I send this to Othram? He got permission on October 27th of 2022. By January of 2023, they receive a message from Othram. We have what we think is your guy.
Wow.
Through genetic genealogy.
Wow.
They then have to speak to the perpetrator, Thomas W. Dunaway, who was 19 at the time. They have to talk to his family members, and this is where the mixed reactions come in. Some family members can't believe that this man would have done this, and other relatives are like, I don't put anything past him, especially after what happened. So here's what else happened. 9 days after Carol Sue goes missing, he joins the Army.
Okay.
It was a short-term thing for him. He just knew it was going to be a way to hide, kind of.
Sure.
So he goes AWOL in December. So he doesn't make it. He makes it through boot camp, and that's about it.
Got it. Okay.
So it's like 6 months, 5 months later, he goes AWOL. He trades or sells the car he used in the commission of Carol Sue's rape and murder, not even probably knowing about fingerprints or blood, but trades it or sells it in Georgia for an orange Vega.
Okay.
He goes from Georgia to Florida, and they find people there who knew him who said, yeah, we didn't know why, but he said he was going to go off the grid and live in a swamp.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he seems like a very smart man.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up back in northern Kentucky with the orange Vega. And I don't know if this man was a friend. I don't know the circumstances. No one can explain. But Ronnie Townsend, in December of 1976, he kills him.
Oh, wow.
And leaves him on the side of the road. Not near Carol Sue, but similar in that he's very close to the road.
Just dumped him on the side of the road.
Yes.
Okay.
And so all of these, so Ronnie, Carol Sue, and Thomas Dunaway lived within a 3-mile radius of each other.
Okay.
They were all similarly aged. They tried so hard to find a connection. Like, how did he know her? Did he know her? Why would she get in the car unless she felt comfortable?
Sure.
Back then, getting a ride from somebody in the 70s was, I had older family members than me that did that. And I remember my grandmother saying, don't ever get in the car with a stranger, And I'm like, okay. And my older cousins would hitchhike.
Sure.
And they're still alive. So I know it's not everybody's a murderer, but you don't do that anymore unless your car's broken down. And even then hopefully you have a knife in your pocket or something you can defend yourself. I'm just saying everyone has cell phones now. So there's probably no need.
Yeah. And
AAA.
Order an Uber and get in the car with a stranger.
And then sexually assault you.
App.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That sexually assault you. Right. Yeah, totally. So they find that he, has killed Ronnie Townsend. He is arrested, indicted, confesses, and given life without the possibility of parole.
Wow.
And he only serves 7.5 years.
Okay. That sounds like there was a possibility of parole even after. Okay, what?
They can't explain why. They cannot find any records. And if Coy Cox can't find it, Melissa Morgan can't find it.
Wow.
The press asked, why did he only stay in for 7.5 years?
Huh.
And he says, we don't know.
That's wow.
Yeah. So he's now 30, 31 when he gets out.
Okay.
And I guess he didn't have too much time to do much more, even though they are looking at him, which they can now, and I'll explain how and why, for more cases, because he died suddenly at the age of 33.
Okay. So
in 1990.
He gets out, lives a couple of years, and dies suddenly. Yeah. Okay.
Does no time for Carol Sue Klaber, but does a short amount of time for Ronnie Townsend's murder.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these family members, I'm going to say one probably extended family member who says, I can't believe Tommy would do that. And then one male family member said, oh, I don't put anything past him after he killed Ronnie Townsend.
Okay.
So, and it happens. And I go back to Carrie Rawson saying, give yourself time to grieve. If you find out a family member did something terrible, give yourself time to grieve.
Sure.
And I'm sure they probably, when someone comes to you and says 46 years ago,
right,
this happened. Do you think that, yeah. So the state of Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, you cannot indict or try someone posthumously.
Okay.
So they get a court order to exhume Thomas Dunaway.
Oh, to match the DNA? Okay.
And even though they're like, this is your guy, there's another reason why they do this. And I'll explain. Okay. So they get the DNA, I'm going to guess from his bones, which is what a lot of what Othram does. Okay. Older cases while you have left or bones, right?
Right.
And so the Commonwealth attorney says, I would have indicted and probably convicted Thomas Dunaway for the rape and murder of Carol Sue Klaber. But here's another reason why they do it. Not only did that DNA prove that he 100% was the person who raped and murdered her via DNA, they want to enter it into CODIS.
Oh.
To see if he's responsible for others.
If there's others, absolutely.
By law, DNA has to be collected directly from the source before you put it into CODIS.
Got you.
So they had to exhume his body. So, yeah, no one can explain why he only did 7.5 years, but thank God he didn't live like that much longer. I think it's amazing that this sketch artist did, when you see the picture of him, what he looked like, and the sketch artist, that person was a true artist. In 1976, that person captured his hair, his eyes, his nose from a witness's, description.
Yeah, that's always amazing to me.
It is to me. Yeah. It is to me. So this case took them to Georgia, to Florida, Colorado. He ends up in Colorado, torches the Vega,
Oh, jeez.
So they would have, if he were still alive, been able to indict him on arson. There was a sawed-off shotgun in the torched Vega.
Oh, wow.
Rape, murder, and kidnapping.
Wow.
Yeah, they could have, indicted him for all of that. When he got back to Kentucky, he was driving a different sedan when he killed Ronnie Townsend. So the second time Coy tears up during the press conference is at the end. And a reporter says, "What's the most gratifying part of cases like this for you?" And he said, "Letting family members know that we've got the person who did this." And he talked about Carol Sue's older brother and teared up again.
Wow.
I know. And he said he had the most difficult thing to do in this whole case. He had to identify her. To say that he had closure in this case is an understatement, but to watch him physically exhale and then be able to verbalize that he felt closure, that was the most rewarding thing for us.
Yeah. Wow.
So that is the trajectory of a case that's 46 years old, and you end up solving another one that was, at that time, 41 years old. I mean, I could just spend hours talking about my adoration for Coy Cox and Tim Adams, but I'll probably stop. But because they're looking at Thomas Dunaway for they just don't believe that he killed Carol Sue and that was it.
That was it. Yeah. Okay.
It was done so brutally and so haphazardly. It reminded me of Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, because he left a woman in a suitcase along the side of the road. It just was like, once he's done with you, he discards you like trash.
Yeah.
Not even bothering to hide. That's like total sociopathy, in a small town.
So they're looking at cases before Carol Sue then?
And after, because he, was out for 6 months and then he was out for 3 years after he got out killing Ronnie Townsend before he died.
Got it. Okay. So after his.
Mm-hmm. So they're actually probably looking at cases for Michael Dean Tate too, because, I don't know how many he's involved in.
Sure.
But now his information's, in CODIS. And if, he's related to more. But I think what they want is if you were around Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati in the late 70s, even into the early 80s, if you're a woman, if you were afraid to admit a sexual assault, if you have any information at all, they would really like to hear from you. Please call the Boone County Sheriff's Office at 859-334-2175. And I'm also going to give you the Kentucky State Police, because during the press conference, Coy mentioned another amazing detective Joe Filiatru, who is with the Kentucky State Police, and he is a stellar human being, and he helped them with this case too. Please call the Kentucky State Police at 859-428-1212, and more cowbell.
If you would like to support this podcast and get early access and other cool murderous swag, go to patreon.com/justthetipsters.